Ohio State made a very questionable hire. They're going to try to tell everyone in the state of Michigan it's a great hire. The honest ones, of which there are still many out there, will recognize exactly what a disaster it is for them to hire Matt Patricia. We're going to discuss that, and we're also going to discuss my position rankings pre-spring. What positions are the strongest? Which ones are the weakest? We will get into all of that right here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. I don't know how much I'm going to have to say about this, because it's almost just like Ohio State hired Matt Patricia to be their new defensive coordinator to replace Jim Knowles, LOL, and it's almost just, okay, there it is. I think it's kind of funny seeing the sycophants that look at this and say, it's like, this is a great hire, 3-time Super Bowl champion, without kind of looking at who was the quarterback of those New England teams and who was the head coach. And also, when that quarterback wasn't with that head coach, did that head coach thrive or did that quarterback thrive? Right? There's a whole bunch of stuff that kind of is going on there, right? Like Bill Belichick didn't exactly light it up in the NFL really at any time when he didn't have Tom Brady as his quarterback. Matt Patricia's defenses were awful, and well, at least middling. I'll say middling. They were middling in the NFL. It was Kyle Rowland, a beat writer who covers Ohio State, who actually pointed that out, that they were not good defenses. And when he was the head coach of the Detroit Lions, let me put it this way. I never checked out of the Lions from the point when I was like, okay, it was like 2002-ish that I was like, I'm going to watch every Lions game and I'm not going to miss one, right? Before then, it was like, I'd watch some here and there. You know, I was a fan, certainly, but I wasn't like that super into it. Like when I was super young, yeah. But you know, in the music years, you know, I would watch the Lions kind of secretly, right? Kind of keep that from my friends. Same thing with Michigan. You know, didn't want to get made fun of. But from 2002 through, it was like 2019, I think was the year that I was just like, I am done. I am absolutely done. I watched maybe not every game because I had some years where my job at the time did not really allow for it. But when I lived in LA, I watched every single Lions game, whether I had to go to a bar, 0-16 season, watched every single one. Whether I had to go to a bar or when I finally was able to move someplace where I could get a satellite dish and thus NFL Sunday ticket and watch all the games from the comfort of my own living room. But it was the Matt Patricia era that made me stop watching the Lions. I mean, it was an abject failure. He took over a Jim Caldwell team that was good but not great, good enough to make the playoff, not good enough to win a playoff game, but at least it was like perennially like, okay, they're like a 9-7 team there in the 16 the 16 game seasons that we had once upon a time. And he took it and he ran it right into the ground. Now, everyone was excited. It was kind of like a media hype thing, right? Like, oh, Matt Patricia is the choice, right? There's always that, right? There's always that person that is that, like the big media choice. This year's probably Ben Johnson, who obviously was a very good offensive coordinator, but had his moments where he really fell apart. A couple years ago, when the Lions hired Dan Campbell, it was Robert Saleh, and he obviously just got let go from the New York Jets. Like, there's always that one coach that was pretty good, maybe great, that is like, oh, that's the next one. But like the thing was, everything that Matt Patricia was advertised to be, he was not. Right? Like, oh, he's just this like rocket surgeon, essentially. And, you know, he's going to draw circles all around you. It wasn't the case. So to go from Jim Knowles to Matt Patricia just feels like a really bizarre move for the Buckeyes because, number one, it's kind of a rebuild in terms of personnel, right? They lose their entire front four. They lose. The only ones that they don't lose really are like Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs. I mean, those are some really good players, Davis and Nick Bignosin. Otherwise, I think they have 8 guys that they have to replace. So it's good in terms of, you don't have a bunch of players running another system. And certainly he's going to be coming to Columbus with a bunch of talent, right? But it's just a head-scratching hire because there certainly has to be other coordinators out there that you would look at and say that would be a better fit. But the fact that like everyone is laughing at them, this is where I'm somewhat reticent, but this is also not LOL Vanderbilt about Jesse Minter, right? Jesse Minter, anyone coaching at Vanderbilt is not exactly going to have like a great track record, right? But like he also came from the Baltimore Ravens and, you know, had you know, he was one of the people that John Harbaugh had told Jim, like, hey, you need to hire this guy. If it's not Mike McDonald, you need to get Jesse Minter. Worked out pretty good for Michigan. So I'm not saying this isn't going to work out for Ohio State, but it just does not feel like this is the type of move you make that's going to make your team better or stronger. If anything else, it's going to be a change in system. It's the system. Will it be successful in college? I mean, that was kind of the question with Michigan, with Mike McDonald, Jesse Minter, and now Wink Martindale. And is Matt Patricia actually a good coach? Those are questions that we have that we don't really have good answers to. So I don't want to laugh at it prematurely, but it is a head scratching hire regardless of that, right? This isn't like the progeny of a system that wanted to continue to run like the Jesse Minter hire. This is changing a system to someone who's had middling success at best across college football or pro football, rather. It wasn't really him that was the reason why there were 3 Super Bowls won. It just happened to be the greatest quarterback of all time that was on the other side of the football that was able to help propel. And I mean, I'm not saying the defense was bad at all times, but like I remember when Matt Patricia was hired to be the Lions coach, it was kind of like, oh, I don't know, man. Like I really wanted him because all the media hype was around him. You always want the guy the media hype is surrounding, right? But like when people were bringing out like what he brought to the table, it was just like, oh, I don't really know about this. So it is at least head scratching, right? At the very least. And the honest ones will tell you that. Again, I'm not here trying to say this is a bad hire. It's just a head scratching one. And if you're a Michigan fan, feel free to celebrate, but understand that could bite you. Okay. Like again, because LOL Vanderbilt, I saved all kinds of receipts I never used back when that happened, but with the Jesse Minter hire. However, I do think that it is nonetheless something that is interesting at the very least. That's all I got. It's interesting. It certainly does not feel like it will be successful based off of what we know about Matt Patricia and his long-term resume. But if you're a Michigan fan, you at least love that Ohio State decided to go down this road. I'd say you wish him the best, but I guess you also don't do that. All right, that's going to do it for that. Let's move on to my position rankings. I ranked all 9 Michigan positions this morning. We will do 5 and then 4, starting with the top position groups and actually working our way down as opposed to going the other way. So we'll do that here in just a moment. But before we do, after the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, WayFair has everything you need, all within your budget. Currently looking for furniture, and their huge selection makes it easy to find pieces to fit my style and budget. My favorite part, the free and hassle-free delivery, even for the larger items. WayFair site, it was so easy to navigate. I found everything I needed in no time. Something for every style and every home, no matter your space or budget. WayFair makes it easy to tackle your New Year's home goals with endless inspiration for every space. So give your home the refresh it needs with WayFair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. WayFair, every style, every home. All right, let's continue on here. I'm pulling this up so I don't just off the top of my head it. I could probably off the top of my head it. Not smart though. All right, why are we doing 5 and 4? Part of it is because a little bit of balance, but I do have 2 tied for number 1. And our number 1 that I had at the literal very top is the same one I had the number 1 last year at this time, and it was not did not live up to expectations in large part due to an injury at said position, as well as some regression from a one player. But I think that this will be a much better group than it was before. You can see some mastery in coaching. Now, I gave everything a personnel and a coaching ranking. out of 10. And for the coaching of the defensive backs as a whole, I gave a 9 out of 10 because I think LaMar Morgan has done a masterful job, right? Like he turned Amir Hall. Like, let's remember, he didn't have Will Johnson from the third quarter in the week 4 on. Right? Well, I shouldn't say from that on. He obviously had him for 2 more games, but like at home, he only had him for a half against Illinois, and he had him for the entire game against Washington, but he actually didn't play his best game. Actually, it might have been his worst. Outside of Fresno State, but at least he had the pick 6 against Fresno State. So he didn't have him for half the season at the very least. He had missed some time otherwise. And yet he smartly moved Zeke Berry to corner. He got a lot out of Amir Hall, who looked like a liability at the beginning of the year. And managed to, like, Jair Hill went from looking like a liability to pretty good. Obviously, though, like, I think it was probably off-field reasons why we didn't really see him that much in the last couple games, but certainly went from being a guy that you were like, ooh, Jair's rough, to being like, yeah, I can trust Jair out there. So that's some corner stuff. We'll get back into corners later, but like the safety position, obviously, you saw a not great season for Makari Page. No Rod Moore next to him. How much did that affect him? Quentin Johnson didn't really look ready for prime time as a starter for a while, and then he kind of looked ready for prime time by the end of the year. And you saw the emergence of both Brandon Hillman and Mason Curtis. So you really like that. So now you add Rod Moore back to the mix, and you've got those guys. You got Arkansas transfer TJ Metcalf, who was a starter, had a breakout year last year. And then I didn't even mention in the article Jaden Mangum, who didn't really play last year after being a starter at MSU. That's a pretty deep group, and it feels like that could go really well. And I could even see a guy like Kanewell Winston working his way in. And heck, if you feel really good at corner, you could move Zeke Berry back. I mean, I know he started out the season in my eyes. The first 3 games were pretty good. The second half from the USC game on at corner, not great. But he held his own playing boundary more so than he played nickel or safety. So they've got a lot of options there, and I really, really like that position group. Tied for number 1 is defensive line, which I feel is just like beyond loaded at this point. I'm a little bit less excited about the coaching with Lou Esposito, not because I think he's a bad coach. I have him as an 8 out of 10. But the reason why, because I have the personnel, I think, at 10 out of 10. Yeah, I do. The reason why I give a knock on Lou Esposito is because he was playing, he was racing with 2 Ferraris, right? Like you had Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant up front, as well as Josiah Stewart. You're racing with some Ferraris up front. So kind of hard to screw that up. They did still screw it up, but it was kind of more the defensive play call than it was the personnel groupings and things of that nature. But I really think that you look at what he's got still coming back: Rayshawn Benny, Trey Williams, Damon Payne, Ike Awona, Trey Pierce, Etta in the middle. On the edge, you bring back Derek Moore, TJ Guy. Like, I think is just gonna TJ Guy has got kind of that Chase Winovich try hard in him. Doesn't get the same type of love as Chase Winovich because he's not as outspoken and doesn't necessarily have the character hair, right? But I think, like, you look at what he was able to do as a backup and occasionally coming as a starter, it's very reminiscent of Chase Winovich 2016. So I think that you got those guys. I'm excited to see what guys like Cam Brandt and Dom Nichols do this next year. Does a guy like Lugar Edakpai end up stepping up, right? Like, he's a 4-star. He was really highly ranked. Just really needed to add some meat on his bones and everything. I think that this is just an unbelievably solid group, and I think is an exciting group. And to me, this is pretty formidable. And we already saw, without Damon Payne and Trey Williams, we saw how formidable it could be against a pretty good Alabama front on the other side in the ReliaQuest Bowl. So very excited about that. Number 3 is quarterback. This is the biggest, I don't want to say boomer or bust, but this could very well be number 1 because it all comes down to one player, right? One quarterback can be on the field. It's not a full position group. And if it's Mikey Keene, it's probably a little bit lower than 3. And if it is Bryce Underwood and he comes along quickly, it's definitely number 1, right? Because he's a generational player coming out of high school, but he has to learn the things he needs to learn coming out of high school. So it's hard to really just necessarily bear down and say, like, yeah, 100%. So I have it at number 3. Personnel, 9 out of 10. Coaching, 7 out of 10, just because we don't know. Chip Lindsey's got a really strong track record with quarterbacks. He's got a really strong track record with offenses, but we got to see it in Ann Arbor, right? That has to happen first. But I really like, obviously, Bryce. And I mean, I like Mikey Keene too, probably more than a lot of the people out there. So behind them, it gets a little bit more murky because now you're going to Davis Warren, and you hope that coming off of an injury, a year of actually playing, that he's a bit better than he was. And then behind that, it's just giant unknowns, right? Like you better not have to get down that far. Now you hope that Bryce ends up coming along faster than not. And you see where that goes. But I think that's an exciting position group. And I think that it's exciting because of one guy, the number one player in the country coming out of high school, and that's Bryce Underwood. And he's got all the tools. Can make all the throws. I'm going to remind you time and time again that I know he probably hates me trading on his name. Connor had said that he's already where JJ was at the time that he left in terms of his ability to make every throw on the field, arm strength, accuracy. It's more so that he needs to be able to make protection calls, read defenses, all the pre-snap stuff. If he can do that, which is easier said than done, I mean, all the talent's already there. So, huge. All right. Next, I got linebacker at number 4. This one's a little bit more of an unknown because we don't know if Jayshawn Barham is going to make that full-time move to edge, as kind of earlier reported. I think if he doesn't, then it's 4. I think if he does, then this drops a little bit. I'm a little bit less excited about the coaching. Brian Jean-Marie, 7 out of 10. I felt like I was really generous there. I gave the personnel an 8 out of 10. Keeping in mind, you're usually only going to see 2 actual linebackers, right? Because, one of the edge rushers is technically an OLB. But you're going to see 2 guys out there in this scheme. So if it's Ernest Hausman, Jayshawn Barham, early season, not great. End of season, fantastic. So if it's those 2 next to each other again, feel really good. You love bringing in Troy Bowles, former 4-star, went to Georgia, didn't really get his opportunity due to Georgia collecting 5-star linebackers the same way Ohio State collects 5-star wide receivers. You still got, at this point, Jaden Hood, Jimmy Rolder, Cole Sullivan, and freshman Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. I think we'll get in some opportunities, but how many opportunities, I'm not sure. I love this room as it stands. I'm discounting a guy like Jason Hewlett, right, who absolutely could kind of step up. He has that big thumper look of a linebacker. So I think that there's a lot that you can kind of work with there, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. All right, let's go to our 5th one, which is going to end segment 1, and that's running back. I gave personnel and coaching 7 out of 10 each. Again, 7 out of 10 is a good coaching metric for Tony Alford. I thought he did a very good job given what he was working with in the moment. Right, like Kalel Mullings ends up being the big guy, and Donovan Edwards has his moments. I feel like Donovan should have gotten a few more moments, much to the chagrin of a lot of Michigan fans, because it always felt like one guy was in and was not getting things going out of the 2. And people would recognize it more when Donovan was struggling more than when Kalel was struggling. But like you look at the Washington game, it was like Donovan seemed like he had everything rolling with him. And then they bring in Kalel and he just gets 2 yards per, right? It's just they had those moments where it was just like one felt like he was going and the other ends up coming in and he ends up struggling. So it didn't end up being like a great situation. But you like it a lot better, even though it's really only 2 guys. It's all potential. It's Jordan Marshall, Justice Haynes, right? Justice Haynes has shown more than anybody else on the roster. But Jordan Marshall, obviously, with 100-some yards against Alabama, breaking a couple big runs, is kind of giving you a nice little preview. And then you got Ben Hall and Micah Kapana, and I really like Jasper Parker as well. So I think that there's still a lot to like there, and I'll be interested to see. I think it's definitely could be a big position of strength. They're going to smash, of course. But a lot of that's also going to be dependent on the offensive line. So that's kind of part of why is it ranked 5 out of 9? Well, unfortunately, their position group is much like wide receivers to quarterback and vice versa. Offensive line and running back also, unfortunately, go hand in hand. All right, we're going to continue with the last 4, the rankings here in just a moment. All right, let's go to number 6 of our list of 9, ranking the Michigan position groups in order of where I'm most confident to least. So we will go to tight end. I think tight end is still a very good position group. I give the coaching 7 out of 10, but personnel is 6 out of 10. Marlon Klein certainly showed you a few things. So did Hogan Hansen. they've got a lot of talent in that room. It's just chock full of 4 stars in particular. It's just a lot of unknown commodities at this point, right? Like Marlon Klein wasn't exactly showing you the types of things yet where you were like, oh yeah, they're in good hands for next year, right? Like it just seemed like, some of the types of catches that Colston Loveland could make, Marlon couldn't. But yet he's more athletic, according to everybody in that building. So you'd like to see them to find a way to make that work for them. And then Hogan Hansen kind of had more of that Colston Loveland look when he was in there. Had some injury issues last year. Not many, but he missed a couple games, if memory serves. And then there's just a whole bunch of other guys that you're like, okay, it'll be interesting to see what they do. Zach Marshall came in and played a lot of the blocking role. I didn't even mention Max Bredesen, who was technically in this group. But he's not really a catching threat, so he didn't really get mentioned in this. He's more of a fullback leadership position, those types of things. But Zach Marshall played some blocking roles when Colston was out, and against USC in particular. I think he had a couple really nice blocks. Deacon Tony Ellie, where's this dude, man? 4-star, just kind of hasn't done anything yet. Makes you question. Brady Prescorn, not ready for prime time yet. Goes down with injury. How much is that going to hamper him coming in? And then you bring in Eli Owens, who's more of the Max Bredesen type. It's just not necessarily a super inspiring list of players, really. But at the same time, it is a crucial position for Michigan, regardless of the offensive coordinator. And it's going to be utilized. So I have it down a little bit lower just because, again, we're talking about potential and we're not talking about results. So that makes it a little bit harder to kind of judge. So that's where we're at. Would really like to see a guy like Brady Prescorn, who at one time was a borderline 5-star, who dropped down the rankings a bit his senior year of high school, kind of take that step forward. Number 7 is cornerback. Now, Zeke Berry sticks there. You'd imagine he does. That gives you some certainty based off of what he was able to do. But then on the other side, it's funny because you'd say Zeke Berry, Jair Hill, and you'd say, okay, I feel fine, given what Jair showed in the latter 2/3 of the season, except for he didn't really play against Northwestern Ohio State and played a little bit against Alabama, but not. Again, he kind of lost a little bit of the luster. Josiah Edmond has high expectations, and could Shamari Earls come and be that guy, right? I think you look at that. I'm not going to write off Jaden Sanders yet, but it's hard to say a freshman's going to be that guy, but Shamari Earls kind of feels like he could be that guy. But the fact that Michigan was so adamantly trying to find another starting corner in the transfer portal, that's kind of what gives me pause. So coaching is 9 out of 10, but personnel is 6 out of 10, because really I just mentioned 4 guys and that's it, right? I could have mentioned the transfer from Louisiana or Tevis Metcalf, and I just feel like those are just big giant unknowns, right? Like the Louisiana guy, what's his name? Not Anthony Simpson, it's Caleb Anderson. Really no stats to speak of. So it's just kind of I have no idea. I have no idea what this looks like. Again, their attempts to find another corner in the transfer portal gave me some massive pause. So I have them, the corners, at number 7 out of 9. If Jair Hill steps up to his potential, Zeke Berry plays how he did, everything's golden. Everything should be good. And honestly, having another year of consistency with Wink Martindale, things very well could be good. Having the same cornerbacks coach, again, everything should be good. Number 8, 2 positions left. Which one doesn't get the bottom? That's offensive line. We just did an offensive line show, a couple days ago? It's a tough group to kind of really figure it out. I've got the personnel at 5 out of 10, coaching 5 out of 10. Grant Newsome gets a little bit of a boost with Juan Castillo coming in. So that's good, right? Because analysts can coach now. So that, he can help out. You can really, help him where he doesn't have the experience. This is a team where you would think the offensive line is going to be very good because of the head coach. But last year was not that great. Now, you get better at football by playing football. The experience wasn't necessarily great, though. Evan Link was much better in the last 2 games than he was the rest of the year, or the last 3 games than he was the rest of the year, which is good, even though he had to move in the ReliaQuest Bowl. However, Giovanni El-Hadi really felt like he regressed from what we had seen from him before. And there's just a lot of questions about who's going to be those 5 that go out there. at this point, at this moment, right? Like I would say it's going to be Evan Link, Lawrence Tatar, Greg Crippen, Giovanni Elhadi, and Andrew Sprague. But like, will the Nathan Afobe step up? Will they hit the spring portal and find somebody like Afalili Falamo, who I was, excited about potentially getting? It's just, there's a lot of questions. Is Luke Hamilton actually in year 2 ready to maybe be a guard? Do you find a way to slide Evan Link in? There's just a lot of questions there. I don't really think that there's a lot of answers, and I don't think that the experience we saw last year is necessarily going to give you a ton of confidence for this one. That said, offensive line 2020, abysmal. Joe Moore Award winner in 2021. So we'll see. So that leaves us with wide receiver, the last one. I was hardest on Ron Bellamy. No offense to him. It's not like Michigan's had a lot of race cars out there for him since he's been a coach, right? Like Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson were very good. More so Roman than Cornelius, but it's a problem area. Personnel 3 out of 10. Not great. I'll list you a bunch of names, and you're just not going to feel that inspired by them, right? It's Samaj Morgan, who's the leading receiver of anyone in a Michigan uniform, is the number 1 guy. Then you got Frederick Moore, who screams potential, but still just hasn't really shown it. Same thing with Amarian Walker. Same thing with Kendrick Bell. Same thing with C.J. Charleston. Same thing with, just go on down the list, right? Channing Goodwin, Amarian Stewart. Who knows? The only 2 that have any kind of worthwhile production are, of course, the 2 transfers. Donovan McCulley, who had almost 700 yards 2 years ago at Indiana, and Anthony Simpson, who had more like 8 at UMass. For now, this is it, right? It does, the quarterback will help matters out, certainly, but this does not feel like a group where you're like, heck yeah, man, I can't wait to see what they do this year. It just does not feel like anything that is doing much of anything. So you hope that maybe the transfer portal helps, or maybe these guys just get better. I mean, this is the position that they play, but you need a game breaker, right? Like Ohio State has Jeremiah Smith. Before Jeremiah Smith, they had Marvin Harrison. Before they had Marvin Harrison, they had 3 guys: Jackson Smith and Jigba, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. Michigan has none of those. No one of that caliber at the moment. So yeah, that's my least ranked for the second year in a row. Wide receiver last. Safety first. Anyway, that's going to do it for us today. We'll be back tomorrow with a mailbag when I put out the call tomorrow morning. Get your questions in. I'll have a cutoff time, and then we'll go to the races. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.